Tell your money to come home. What's yours always returns. Florence Scovel Shinn. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that money is not a solid thing to be gripped and guarded, but a living current of supply that answers to the spoken word and returns to the one who calls it home in faith. There is an old verse tucked into the book of Ecclesiastes, the 11th chapter, the 1st verse, and it reads, "Cast thy bread upon the waters, for thou shalt find it after many days." Picture that for a moment. Bread let go, bread trusted to a moving current, bread that seems to disappear beneath the surface the instant it leaves your hand. And yet the promise is not that it is gone. The promise is that it is found again, after many days, in its own season, in its own way. And this, dear one, is the whole secret of money. It is not something you clutch until your knuckles ache. It is something you release in faith, knowing the very current that carried it away is the very current appointed to carry it home again. Here is a word to plant deep in your consciousness right now. Every dollar I release comes home to me in peace. Every dollar I release comes home to me increased. My word is my wand. Say it with me. Every dollar I release comes home to me in peace. Every dollar I release comes home to me increased. My word is my wand. Again. Every dollar I release comes home to me in peace. Every dollar I release comes home to me increased. My word is my wand. And if this word is doing something quiet and warm in you right now, I would love for tomorrow's teaching to find its way to you too. So consider staying close by subscribing, that these words may keep meeting you right where you stand. Before we walk through the keys, I want you to type 2 words in the comments below. Just 2 words. Come home. Type them now if you feel them stirring, because there is power in declaring it where others can witness your faith. The first key is knowing that your money is not lost, it is only away. This is the foundation beneath everything else we will walk through today. So let it settle into you now, slowly, quietly, like sunlight settling into cold water. When a check is delayed, when a refund is slow, when an invoice sits unpaid on someone's desk, the untrained mind whispers that the money is gone, that it has slipped through some crack in the universe, never to be seen again. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught that nothing that belongs to you by right of consciousness can ever be permanently withheld from you. It may circle, it may take the long way, it may pass through many hands and many delays before it reaches yours. But if it is yours in truth, it is only away, not lost. Think of a woman waiting on a tax refund that should have arrived weeks ago. Each day she checks the mailbox, and each day it is empty, and slowly a small ache begins to form in her chest. A fear that somewhere in some office her money has simply vanished. But nothing has vanished. It is only away, moving through its appointed channel, on its appointed timeline, exactly like a letter still in transit, still addressed to her, still coming. Think also of a small child sent on an errand, who takes the long path home through the park, stopping to watch a bird, stopping to look at the clouds. The parent standing at the window does not panic and declare the child gone forever. The parent simply knows the child is on the way, still coming home, still theirs. This is the exact attitude to hold toward every dollar that has left your hand, or every dollar you are still awaiting, not gone, only away. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the moment you stop mourning it as lost, you stop sealing the door against it. You stop speaking the very words that keep it circling, and instead you open the one channel through which it can finally return to you. So whisper this to yourself gently, right where you are. It is only away. It is not lost. It is finding its way home to me even now. The second key is speaking to your money the way you would call a beloved home for supper. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the spoken word is the most creative force available to us, that it goes out into the unseen and rearranges circumstance according to the faith behind it. So this key asks you to stop thinking about money in the passive tense. Stop saying, I hope it comes. I wonder if it will arrive. I do not know when this will be resolved. And instead speak to it directly as a living thing that hears you and answers you. Because Florence Scovel Shinn taught that supply is intelligent, it is responsive, it is not a cold mechanical process, but a current of life that moves toward the voice of faith and away from the voice of doubt. Think of how differently a name lands when it is called out in worry, compared to when it is called out in warm certainty. A mother standing at the back door at dusk does not shout her child's name in dread. She calls it with the quiet authority of someone who already knows the child will turn and come running. This is exactly the tone Florence Scovel Shinn asked her students to bring to their words about money. Not a frightened whisper flung into the dark, but a warm, certain call, spoken as though the outcome were already settled. Say aloud, my money hears my voice and answers my voice. And feel the difference between saying that with clenched hope and saying it the way you would call someone home you already trust to walk through the door. I think of a woman I once heard of who had been waiting on a settlement for months, letters unanswered, calls unreturned, days passing with no word, and instead of continuing to phone in anxiety, checking the mailbox with a tight chest morning after morning, she began each day speaking softly to that very money, as though it were a traveller finding its way home to her door. She would stand quietly and say, "You are free to come to me now. You are already on your way to me now." And she did not say it once in desperation. She said it daily, gently, the way you might leave a lamp lit for someone you expect. And within weeks, without any dramatic explanation, without a single confrontation or demand, the check simply appeared. This is not superstition, and it is not wishful thinking. This is Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching, in its plainest and most practical form. The spoken word held steady in faith becomes the very road the money travels down to reach you. It is not that speaking makes money appear from nothing. It is that speaking aligns your consciousness with the truth that your good is already moving toward you. And consciousness, Florence Scovel Shinn taught, is the one force that circumstance must eventually obey. So today, do not merely think about your finances in the back of your mind while you go about your day. Speak to them directly, quietly, privately if you must. Call your money the way you would call anything you love, and fully trust to return, with warmth, with certainty, and without a single trace of pleading in your voice. The third key is releasing the grip of fear that keeps supply circling instead of landing. And this one deserves real attention because so many good and faithful people unknowingly hold their money hostage through the very anxiety meant to protect it. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that fear is faith upside down. It is belief pointed in the wrong direction. And money, being sensitive to the state behind it, cannot rest in a hand that is trembling. Think of trying to catch a bird while your hand is shaking. The bird will not land. It senses the tension and stays airborne, circling, waiting for stillness. This is precisely what happens with supply when we approach it white-knuckled, when we check the bank balance 5 times a day in dread. When we speak of bills with a tight chest and a held breath, we are, without meaning to, telling our money that our hand is not a safe place to land. I think of a man I heard of once who worked hard, who was honest in every dealing, and yet who lived every month in a low, simmering panic about whether the bills would clear. He would open his banking app first thing each morning, before his feet even touched the floor, heart pounding, half expecting bad news. And even on the mornings when the balance was fine, the relief lasted only minutes before the dread crept back in, watching for what might go wrong next. And Florence Scovel Shinn would have said, this man, faithful as he was in effort, was faithless in consciousness, because his hand, though open in appearance, was clenched in feeling, and money, sensitive as it is to the atmosphere that surrounds it, kept circling his life, instead of settling into it. It was not until he changed the ritual, not the circumstances, the ritual, that anything shifted. He began each morning, instead with his hand literally open on his lap, breathing slowly, saying quietly, "My hand is open, and my supply is safe to land here now." And within a season, the same income that had once felt like it was slipping through his fingers began to feel steady, dependable, even generous. Nothing outside him had changed yet. The shift happened first in the state within, and the outer circumstance simply followed the pattern already set in consciousness. This key asks you to practice a kind of financial stillness, not carelessness, not denial of the bill on the table, but an inner steadiness that says, "I am safe, my supply is safe, my hand is open and ready to receive." Notice too how fear so often disguises itself as responsibility. We tell ourselves that worrying is simply being careful, that checking anxiously is simply being diligent. But Florence Scovel Shinn drew a clear line between watchfulness and worry. Watchfulness is calm attention, worry is fearful grasping, and only one of the two ever attracts supply, the other only repels it. So today, notice where your vigilance has quietly become fear, wearing a respectable mask, and gently set it down. Florence Scovel Shinn often told her students to bless what frightened them, to bless the unpaid bill, to bless the empty space in the account, because blessing dissolves fear faster than any amount of worrying ever could. Blessing is simply love, spoken toward the very thing that frightens you. And love, she taught, casts out fear the way light dissolves shadow, without struggle, without force, simply by being present. So when fear rises in you today, whether it comes as a bill on the counter or a balance that looks thinner than you would like, do not fight it with more anxious thinking. Simply open your hand, breathe, and declare, "My hand is open, and my supply is safe to land here now." Say it as many times as it takes for the tightness in your chest to loosen, because that loosening, that softening, is the very signal that the current has begun to move again. And watch how the very energy around your finances begins to soften and shift toward you rather than away. The fourth key is forgiving every hand that seems to be holding what is yours. And this key often surprises people because they do not expect forgiveness to have anything to do with their bank account. They think forgiveness belongs in the chapel and money belongs in the ledger, and never the two shall meet. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught again and again that unforgiveness is one of the most common blocks to supply, far more common than most people ever suspect, because consciousness does not sort its feelings into separate drawers, one drawer for people and one drawer for money. It is all one current, one continuous stream of energy flowing through you, and whatever knot you tie in that stream over a person will also tighten around your finances, whether you intended it to or not. Think of the friend who borrowed money years ago and quietly never mentioned it again. Think of the employer who underpaid you for seasons while praising your loyalty. Think of the family member who inherited what you privately believed should have been shared. Every time you rehearse that old injustice in your mind, every time you replay the scene and feel the sting fresh again, you are, without realizing it, tying an invisible knot in the very channel meant to carry your good to you. The mind cannot hold a grudge against a person while remaining open and relaxed toward supply in general, because the grudge itself is a clenched state, and a clenched state cannot receive. So Florence Scovel Shinn would tell her students plainly, "Bless the one who owes you. Say it aloud if you must. I fully and freely forgive you. I loose you and let you go, and I release my good to come to me now from other and better directions." Notice how that release moves in two directions at once. You release the person from the debt of your resentment, and just as importantly, you release yourself from waiting on that one narrow channel, as though it were the only door through which your good could ever arrive. Because supply is not limited to the hand that once withheld it. Supply is limitless. It has 1,000 paths and 1,000 doors. And when you stop demanding that your good come from one particular source, one particular person, one particular apology that may never come, you free it to arrive through 100 unexpected directions instead. Let me tell you of a man I heard of once. A contractor who had built a small business with a partner he trusted completely, and when that partnership dissolved, it dissolved badly. The partner walked away with funds that were never fairly divided, and for years afterward, this man carried the story with him everywhere. He told it to new acquaintances at dinner. He told it to his own reflection at 2 in the morning. He told it so often that it became less a memory and more a room he lived inside. And all the while, his business struggled to gain footing. Clients who seemed promising would vanish without explanation. Contracts fell through at the final signature. Money that should have flowed steadily instead trickled and stalled. He could not see it then, but he was standing at the very door of his own supply, with his hand pressed against it from the inside, keeping it shut. And one evening, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour, he simply stopped. He sat with the whole story one final time, not to rehearse it again, but to release it, and he said, out loud, in his empty kitchen, "I forgive you fully. I let this go. I let my good come to me now, from every direction that is not this one." And he described what followed as something almost physical, a loosening in the chest he did not know had been tight for years. Within that same month, an entirely unrelated opportunity came to him. A referral from someone he barely knew, offering him more work and better terms than anything the old partnership had ever provided. This is not a pleasant coincidence. This is the law working exactly as Florence Scovel Shinn described it. The moment the knot in his consciousness loosened, the channel that had been blocked simply opened, and supply, which had been circling patiently all along, came home. I want to be careful here, because forgiveness in this teaching is never asked of you as a performance. Florence Scovel Shinn was clear that saying the words while still gripping the resentment underneath accomplishes very little. The words must be spoken until they are felt, until the story loses its grip on your chest. And sometimes this takes speaking the forgiveness daily, not because forgiveness is fragile, but because old grooves in the mind are worn deep, and a new groove takes gentle, repeated tending before it becomes the natural path your thoughts follow. So if the resentment rises again tomorrow, do not despair and conclude the forgiveness failed. Simply speak the word again. I fully and freely forgive. I loose this and let it go. I release my good to come to me from every direction, now open to it. Say it as many mornings as it takes, because each time you say it and mean it a little more than before, the knot loosens a little further. And this is also worth remembering. Forgiveness does not require the other person to apologize, to acknowledge what happened, or even to know you have forgiven them at all. This key is not about them. It never was. It is entirely about untying your own hands, so your own good, waiting patiently in the unseen, can finally reach you unobstructed. Forgiveness is not weakness here, and it is certainly not surrender. It is the quiet, deliberate untying of the very knot that has been keeping your own supply circling instead of landing. So today, if there is a hand you have been silently blaming for what has not yet come to you, loose it, bless it, release it fully, and watch how many other doors begin quietly opening the moment that one hand is no longer holding your attention hostage. The fifth key is blessing what leaves you so that it returns to you multiplied. And this is where the picture of casting bread upon the waters becomes wonderfully practical, because most of us have been trained since childhood to grip money tightly, to feel a small jolt of dread every time we pay a bill, sign a check, or watch a purchase leave our account. And Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the way you feel about money leaving you determines the way money feels about coming back to you. If you release it in resentment, it goes out wounded and slow. If you release it in blessing, it goes out like a seed planted in good soil, expected to return with increase. So this key asks you to change the small private ritual of paying. The next time you pay rent, pay a bill, tip a server, give to a cause you love, whisper quietly, "This money blesses everyone it touches, and returns to me multiplied." Do not rush past this practice thinking it too simple to matter. Florence Scovel Shinn built entire lessons around exactly this kind of small daily blessing, because the subconscious mind, which governs so much of our experience, is trained through repetition, and every bill blessed, instead of resented, retrains it toward abundance instead of scarcity. Let me tell you of a woman who once dreaded the first of every month, the way the rent came due, and something in her chest would tighten before she even opened the envelope. She would write the check with a kind of silent grief, as though she were bleeding rather than paying, and month after month her finances stayed exactly as tight as her jaw was in that moment. Until one day she learned this very key, that the money leaving her hand could be blessed instead of mourned. So the following month, instead of writing the check in dread, she paused, held the envelope for a moment, and said softly, "This money blesses my landlord. It blesses this home that shelters me, and it returns to me multiplied." Nothing about her income changed that week. No raise, no windfall. And yet within that same month, an old client she had nearly forgotten reached out with an unexpected project, paying her nearly the exact amount of that month's rent. This is not magic, dear one. This is law. This is the seed planted in blessing, bearing its appointed fruit, exactly as Florence Scovel Shinn described it. Think of a farmer scattering seed across his field. He does not clutch the seed in his fist, mourning its loss as it leaves his hand. He does not chase after each kernel, weeping that it is gone. He scatters it freely, fully expecting a harvest larger than what he sowed. No farmer has ever grown a field by keeping his seed locked in the barn, and no consciousness has ever grown its supply by keeping money gripped in fear. The very nature of seed is that it must leave the hand to become a harvest, and the very nature of money is that it must move to multiply. This is the picture to hold with every dollar that leaves you today. Not loss, but planting, and every seed planted in blessing has within it the law of increase. Notice too how differently this feels from mere positive thinking. This is not about pretending you are happy to pay a bill you resent. It is about genuinely shifting the inner state so the resentment has no place left to live. Florence Scovel Shinn often said that we must bless that which we release, for in blessing it we release ourselves from the poverty thought that clings to it. When you resent a bill, you are, in that very moment, affirming lack, affirming that money leaving you is a loss you cannot afford. But when you bless it, you affirm the opposite, that you are so abundantly supplied that this payment is simply the current moving through you on its way back around, richer than before. This applies not only to bills, but to every form of giving: the tip left for a server, the gift bought for a friend, the donation given to a cause close to your heart, the tax paid to the government. All of it can be blessed rather than begrudged. And I want to be plain here. Florence Scovel Shinn was not asking her students to feel foolish joy over money they wished they did not have to spend. She was asking them to recognize that resentment is a closed hand, and a closed hand cannot receive anything new, while a blessing hand, even one letting go of its very last dollar, remains open, and an open hand is always the hand supply finds its way into. So when money leaves your hand today, whether for grocery or rent or gift or tax, bless it on its way out, and know that in blessing it, you are quietly, invisibly, setting the return already in motion. Speak the words softly if you must, under your breath. This money blesses everyone it touches, and returns to me multiplied. And let this become as natural a habit as the breath itself. until one day you notice, as that woman did, that what you have been blessing has indeed been returning, not always through the same door it left by, but always, without fail, in its own perfect season. The sixth key is gratitude, and Florence Scovel Shinn spoke of gratitude as one of the most powerful magnets in the entire universe of consciousness. More powerful, she often said, than pleading. More powerful than striving, because pleading admits lack, and striving admits struggle, but gratitude admits fullness. Gratitude stands in the present moment and declares that the good is already here, already flowing, already yours, and what consciousness holds as already present, consciousness cannot help but expand. This is the quiet mathematics behind every teaching Florence Scovel Shinn ever gave on supply. So this key asks you to become genuinely, warmly, unmistakably grateful, not only for the large sum still finding its way to you, but for every small return that has already come home. The unexpected refund, the small check in the mail, the discount you were not expecting, the gift from a friend, the coin found in an old coat pocket. Most people rush past these small returns without a single word of thanks, treating them as too minor to notice, too small to matter. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught, again and again, in lesson after lesson, that gratitude for the small is precisely what opens the door to the large. The small thanked becomes the seed of the large received, and the small ignored becomes a door quietly left closed. Let me give you a picture of this, so it settles into you fully. Imagine a woman named Clara, and Clara has been praying faithfully for a specific sum of money, a sum large enough to change her circumstances. She speaks her word each morning, she does the inner work, and yet week after week, that specific sum does not appear. But during those same weeks, smaller things keep happening around her. A client pays an old invoice she had written off. A store clerk gives her a discount she did not ask for. A forgotten rebate check arrives in the mail. And Clara, focused entirely on the large sum she is awaiting, barely notices these small arrivals. She deposits them absent-mindedly, without a single word of thanks, without pausing to acknowledge that her supply is, in fact, moving. In fact, responding, in fact, already finding its way toward her in 100 small, quiet ways. And so the larger sum continues to delay, not because it is being withheld from her, but because she has not yet demonstrated, through gratitude, that she notices and welcomes what is already arriving. Now imagine Clara shifts. Imagine she begins a small practice. At the end of each day, she names one thing that came back to her, however small, and she says aloud, "Thank you. This is my supply returning to me. More is on its way." At first, this feels almost silly to her, thanking heaven for a coupon, thanking heaven for a $5 rebate. But she continues, faithfully, quietly, and within weeks, something shifts. The returns grow slightly larger, then larger still, and eventually the very sum she had been awaiting begins moving toward her through an avenue she never expected. This is not coincidence, dear one. This is the magnet of gratitude at work, exactly as Florence Scovel Shinn described it, because supply behaves very much like a living current that responds to acknowledgement. Think of it this way. If a friend gives you a gift, and you never acknowledge it, never say thank you, never even meet their eyes with warmth, that friend will eventually, quietly, stop giving, not out of spite, not out of punishment, but simply because the gesture met no response. It fell into silence, and silence, over time, discourages the hand from giving again. Supply behaves in much the same tender way. When you notice and give thanks for every small return, you are, in effect, telling the universe that its gifts are seen, that they are welcomed, that they matter, and it sends more, This is why Florence Scovel Shinn so often said that gratitude opens the very windows of supply that striving keeps shut. So I want to give you a practice today, something small enough to actually do and powerful enough to actually work. At the end of each day, before you close your eyes, name one thing that came back to you. It does not need to be dramatic. It can be the smallest coin, the smallest coupon, the bill that came in lower than you feared, the parking spot that saved you a fee, and say quietly, "Thank you. This is my supply returning to me. More is on its way." Say it and mean it. Say it until it becomes as natural as breathing. This simple habit, practiced with sincerity, slowly rewires the entire relationship you carry with money, moving you from a posture of scarcity and waiting into a posture of confidence and welcome. Because gratitude trains your eyes to see evidence everywhere that what is yours does indeed come home. And once you see it once, truly see it, you begin to see it everywhere. A returned dollar here, a small gift there, a bill forgiven, a debt settled. Each one becomes proof upon proof, and proof upon proof becomes an unshakable knowing. And here is something else worth noticing. Gratitude does something fear can never do. Fear contracts. Fear narrows the channel. Fear makes the hand close tight around what little it has. But gratitude opens. And gratitude widens the very channel through which supply moves. So when you give thanks for the small, you are not merely being polite to the universe, you are literally widening the road down which your larger good must travel to reach you. This is why Florence Scovel Shinn placed such enormous weight on this key. She considered gratitude not a soft, sentimental afterthought, but a precise spiritual technology, as reliable in its results as any law of nature. Water still runs downhill. Gratitude still draws supply. These things do not change with mood or circumstance. So today, and every day after today, practice noticing, practice naming, practice giving thanks aloud for every small return, however small it may seem to the untrained eye. Because Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the small returns are not the whole of your supply, they are simply the visible edge of it, proof that the larger current beneath is moving, is alive, is already on its way toward you. This is the magnet of gratitude, quiet, cumulative, and entirely dependable. The seventh key is releasing the how and trusting the way. And this key often feels like the hardest one to truly live, because the human mind loves to plan the exact route by which its good should arrive. We imagine the raise, the specific client, the particular relative who might help, the one phone call that would fix everything. And when that exact channel does not open on schedule, we quietly conclude that nothing is coming at all, as though the universe only had one door, and we watched it stay shut. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught plainly that supply is not limited to the channels we can imagine. It is limitless, and it often approaches from directions the logical mind would never have considered, she would remind her students. Do not tell the universe how to do it. Simply trust that it will be done. And this is not a call to laziness. It is a call to release the exhausting habit of trying to control the mechanism while still fully expecting the result. Think of a man who spends his evenings drawing a single road on a map, tracing it over and over with his finger until the paper wears thin, convinced this is the only possible route his good can travel, and while he stares at that one line, 100 other roads sit quietly in the margins, unnoticed, unused, waiting to be trusted. This is what fixation on the how does to us. It takes a limitless field and shrinks it down to one narrow lane, and then we wonder why supply feels so slow. So let me tell you of a woman I heard of once, a mother juggling bills alone, who had set her whole heart on a particular position at a company across town. She rehearsed the interview in her mind nightly. She pictured the exact desk she would sit at, the exact paycheck amount, and when the position went to someone else, she felt as though her supply itself had been rejected. She sat with that disappointment for days, tight-chested, replaying what she could have said differently, and it was only when she finally exhaled and said, quietly, to no one but herself, "All right then, show me the way I cannot yet see," that something loosened in her. Within 2 weeks, a neighbor she barely knew mentioned an opening in an entirely different field, one she had never once considered, offering steadier pay and gentler hours than the position she had grieved. The door she had stared at had been the wrong door all along, but she could not see that until she stopped guarding it so tightly. This happens again and again once you stop insisting on the how, because your fixation on one channel actually narrows what your consciousness allows itself to receive. It is like standing in a house full of open windows while pressing your whole body against the one that is painted shut. When you release the how, you are not giving up on the goal. Hear this clearly. You are not giving up on the goal. You are simply widening the door through which it may come. Florence Scovel Shinn often used the phrase infinite way to describe this, meaning there is not one bridge to your good, there are countless bridges, some visible to you now, most not, some so unlikely you would never have thought to build them yourself, and your work is simply to hold the goal with faith and let go of scripting the exact road that carries it to you. This is far harder for the mind than it sounds, because the mind has been trained since childhood to believe that control is safety, that if we can just map the plan precisely enough, nothing can go wrong. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught the opposite. She taught that the tighter the grip on the plan, the more the plan itself becomes an obstacle. Because faith cannot breathe inside a fist. Faith needs room. Faith needs an open hand and an open horizon. So consider the checks you may be waiting on right now. The client who has not called, the sale that has not closed, the family member who has not responded. Ask yourself honestly whether you have quietly decided that your good can only come through that one narrow gate. And if you find that you have, gently, patiently, begin to loosen that grip, not by abandoning hope for that channel, but by opening your awareness to every other channel as well. Say to yourself, "My good comes to me by ways I cannot always foresee, and I trust the way even when I cannot yet see it." Say it slowly, let it settle, because this single shift, from gripping the how to trusting the way, is often the very thing that finally allows stalled supply to move again. It removes the friction of your own anxious insistence and replaces it with the calm expectancy that welcomes surprise. Think of water finding its way down a hillside. It does not argue with the rocks in its path. It does not demand one particular route. It simply moves, adjusting, flowing around what will not move, finding every low place, every opening, until it reaches the valley. This is the posture Florence Scovel Shinn invites you into. Not the rigid march of a soldier following one order, but the flowing patience of water that trusts the valley will be reached regardless of which path it takes to get there. So today, whatever door you have been staring at, waiting for it alone to open, gently loosen your gaze, unclench the fingers of your expectation, and let your consciousness widen to include every unseen door as well. The side entrance you never noticed, the friend of a friend, the opportunity that has not even been invented yet. Trust the way, even before you can trace its shape, because the way is already forming, quietly, faithfully, exactly as it always has for those who stop demanding the map and simply walk. The 8th key is patience in the gap between the word spoken and the proof seen. And I want to speak to this one tenderly, slowly, because this is the place where so many sincere seekers lose heart. Right at the very threshold of their own answered prayer, they speak the word, they release the fear, they bless what leaves them, they practice gratitude faithfully, and then, in the days or even the weeks that follow, nothing visible seems to change. The account looks the same, The mailbox holds the same old bills. The phone stays quiet, and doubt creeps in on soft feet, whispering that none of it worked, whispering that they must have said the word wrong, or believed it wrong, or simply are not the kind of person to whom such things happen. And this is exactly the moment Florence Scovel Shinn warned her students about most, because she taught that there is always a gap, a kind of sacred incubation period, between the moment consciousness shifts within you and the moment circumstance rearranges itself to reflect that shift on the outer plane. And she was clear that this gap is not evidence of failure, it is evidence of process. It is the proof that something real is happening, even though nothing visible has arrived yet. Think of a seed planted beneath the soil. For days there is no green shoot, no sign, nothing an impatient eye could point to and say, yes, it is working. And if a nervous gardener were to dig up that seed every morning just to check on its progress, to see whether the roots were really forming, he would tear the very threads of growth he was so anxious to confirm. The digging itself would destroy the thing he longed to see bloom. But a wise gardener does something entirely different. He waters, he waits, he goes about the rest of his life, trusting that the dark, quiet, invisible work beneath the surface is every bit as real, every bit as active, as the visible stalk that will eventually break through. This, dear one, is the exact posture Florence Scovel Shinn asked her students to hold toward their own supply. She called it standing steady in faith while the manifestation is not yet visible on the physical plane, and she would remind them, gently but firmly, that impatience is often the very thing that delays the harvest. Let me give you a picture from ordinary life, because I think it will settle this teaching into you more deeply than any theory could. Imagine a woman who has mailed an important letter, a request for reimbursement, something she genuinely needs, and for the first few days after mailing it, she feels calm. She trusts the postal system. She does not march down to the post office, demanding to see her letter mid-transit. She does not call the recipient every few hours, asking if it has arrived yet. She simply mails it and lives her life. But suppose on day 4, with no reply yet, she begins to panic. She calls once, then twice, then 5 times in a single afternoon. She sends anxious follow-up messages, laced with apology and worry. She checks her mailbox 7 times a day, even though the mail carrier only comes once. Notice what has happened. The letter has not changed. The request has not changed, but her state has changed. And it is precisely this anxious, checking, doubting state that Florence Scovel Shinn warned would work against her, because each frantic check reaffirms the belief that the answer has not yet come, rather than the calm, knowing that it is already on its way. The very energy of doubt can, in its own quiet way, slow the current she is so desperately trying to hurry along. This is why Florence Scovel Shinn taught her students to practice a very particular kind of patience, not the passive, resigned waiting that says, "Nothing may come, so I will simply endure," but an active, expectant waiting that says it is already moving toward me, even though I cannot yet see it. This is the patience of someone who has dropped a letter in the mailbox and now goes on with her day, humming, unbothered, because she has already decided in her heart that the reply is coming. She does not need to watch the mailbox to make it true. Her peace itself is a form of faith, and faith, Florence Scovel Shinn taught, is the very substance that carries the answer home. So when you find yourself in this gap, when you have spoken your word and released your fear and blessed what has left you, and still the days pass without visible proof, resist every urge to dig up the seed, resist the frantic checking, resist the anxious follow-up sent from a place of dread rather than trust. Instead, speak gently to yourself the way you would speak to a frightened child, and say, "It is already done. I am simply waiting for my eyes to catch up to what my heart already knows." I think, too, of how differently this gap feels depending on the state we bring into it. One person waits for a check in dread, watching the calendar, feeling smaller and more anxious with every passing day, while another person, having spoken the same word with the same sincerity, waits in a kind of quiet cheerfulness, going about her errands, enjoying her coffee, laughing with her children, trusting completely. And it is remarkable, though Florence Scovel Shinn saw it again and again in her own work, how often it is this second person whose answer arrives first, not because the universe favors the cheerful over the anxious out of some arbitrary preference, but because cheerful trust is simply a clearer, steadier channel, unclouded by the static of fear, through which the answer can travel unobstructed. So this key is really an invitation to change the quality of your waiting, not to wait less, but to wait differently, to trade dread for expectancy, to trade the frantic checking of the mailbox for the quiet humming of someone who already knows the letter is coming. And I want you to notice something else Florence Scovel Shinn often pointed to, that the length of the gap is rarely a measure of whether the answer is coming, it is only a measure of timing, and timing belongs to a wisdom far beyond our own limited sight. Some seeds break the surface in days, others take much longer, needing deeper roots first to hold the weight of what is coming. And if you have ever watched a bamboo plant, you may know that for years it shows almost nothing above the soil, while its root system quietly, invisibly, spreads wide and strong beneath the surface. And then, once that root system is finally ready, it shoots upward with astonishing speed, growing what looks impossible in a matter of weeks. This is often exactly what is happening in your own gap. The years or weeks of apparent nothing are not wasted. They are root years. They are the quiet strengthening of the very foundation that will one day support the visible harvest you have been asking for. So do not despise the gap. Do not curse the waiting. Honor it as the sacred, necessary, root-building season it truly is. So I ask you today, in whatever gap you are currently standing, between the word you have spoken and the proof your eyes have not yet seen, choose this steadier posture. Breathe, loosen the grip of anxious checking, and say quietly to yourself, I have spoken the word, I have done my part, and now I release the timing into a wisdom greater than my own. My good is already on its way to me, and I will not dig up the seed to prove that it is growing. I will simply water it with my peace. This, dear one, is one of the most overlooked and yet most powerful of all Florence Scovel Shinn's keys, because it asks for nothing dramatic, no elaborate ritual, no special skill, only steadiness, only the willingness to keep trusting quietly in the dark before the proof ever appears in the light. And I promise you, the gap always closes, always, in its own perfect timing, exactly as the old verse promised. After many days, the ninth key is claiming your supply as already home before your eyes have seen a single trace of it. And this is the key that gathers up everything we have walked through today into one final, powerful posture of faith. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the highest form of prayer is not asking, it is thanking. It is the settled inner knowing that what you have called for has already been granted on the unseen plane and now waits only for its appointed moment to appear on the visible one. This means that today, right now, before the check clears, before the refund posts, before the debt is repaid, before the raise is announced, you are invited to speak of your money as already returned, not someday returned, not hopefully returned, already returned, say, it is done, my money is already home, I am simply watching it appear. This may feel bold, even uncomfortable, especially if your circumstances currently look nothing like this claim. But Florence Scovel Shinn was clear that circumstances are simply the outer picture of a previous state of consciousness. They are always a little behind, never ahead. So if you wait for circumstances to convince you before you feel confident, you will wait forever, because confidence held first is exactly what rearranges circumstance to catch up and match it. Let me give you a small picture of how this looks in an ordinary life, because this key is not meant to live only in lovely language. It is meant to live at your kitchen table. Imagine a woman named Ruth, and Ruth is waiting on a tax refund that has been delayed for weeks. Every day she checks the mailbox with a small knot in her stomach, and every day the mailbox is empty, and each empty day adds one more brick to the wall of her doubt, until one morning she remembers this teaching, and she does something unusual. She stops checking the mailbox as though searching for proof, and instead she walks to it as though collecting something she already owns. She says quietly to herself, "This refund is already mine. It is already resting somewhere on its way to me. I am not waiting for it. I am simply receiving it." And she begins setting a small place for it in her mind, the way you might set an extra chair at the table for a guest you know is coming. She does not know the day. She does not know the hour. But she knows the guest is already on the road, and within days, not weeks, the letter arrives. And Ruth would later say, it was not the letter that changed things. It was the moment she stopped waiting and started receiving. This is the shift Florence Scovel Shinn asked of every student, not to manufacture false cheer, but to change the entire posture of the heart, from empty-handed longing to open-handed welcome. Notice the difference between these two inner postures, because it is the difference between struggle and rest. One posture stands at the window watching the road, anxious, checking, doubting, wondering if today is the day. The other posture stands at an open door, already dressed, already certain, simply enjoying the last few moments before the guest steps inside. Both postures are waiting for the same thing to arrive, but only one of them is aligned with the law. Florence Scovel Shinn called this living in the fourth dimension of faith, the place where the thing desired is already accomplished in consciousness, and the visible world has no choice, in its own time, but to arrange itself to match what has already been settled within. This is why she so often told her students to give thanks before the answer came, rather than after, because thanksgiving offered in advance is the boldest form of faith there is. It says, "I am so certain this is already mine, that I will celebrate it now, rather than waiting for permission from the outer world to feel joy." I want you to hear this key from another angle as well, because it is easy to mistake this claiming for wishful thinking, and it is nothing of the sort. Wishful thinking hopes quietly in the corner and fears to speak too boldly in case it is disappointed. But this key asks for a declared, spoken, decided claim. Florence Scovel Shinn would have her students say, with real conviction, "My ships have come in," meaning every good thing that belongs to them by right of consciousness is even now making its way to shore. And she chose that phrase deliberately, because a ship that has come in is not a ship you are still hoping will arrive one day. It is a ship already visible on the horizon, already docking, already unloading its cargo. This is the tone this key asks you to take with your own supply today. Not "my ship may come in eventually if I am patient enough," but "my ship has come in. It is here. It is simply being unloaded piece by piece, and every day that passes is only the unloading, not the waiting." There is a reason this key is placed last among the 9, because it depends on every key that came before it. You cannot easily claim your money as already home if you still believe deep down that it is lost. So the first key clears that ground. You cannot claim it with authority if you have never learnt to speak to it directly. So the second key trains your voice. You cannot claim it while your hand is still clenched in fear. So the third key opens your palm. You cannot claim it while you are still bitter toward those who seem to hold it. So the fourth key unties that knot. You cannot claim it while you resent what leaves you. So the fifth key teaches you to bless it on its way out. You cannot sustain the claim without gratitude feeding it daily. So the sixth key becomes its fuel. You cannot hold the claim if you are still gripping the exact how. So the seventh key widens the road, and you cannot hold the claim steady through the quiet gap of waiting without the patience of the eighth key. So by the time you arrive here, at this ninth and final key, you are not manufacturing confidence out of nothing, you are simply standing on the ground the other 8 keys have already prepared for you, and from that ground, the claim, "It is done. My money is already home," is no longer a hopeful sentence. It is a true report of your inner state, spoken aloud so the outer world can begin to catch up to it. So let this be the posture you carry with you when you leave this teaching today, not the posture of someone still hoping their money might return, but the posture of someone standing at an open door, light already spilling out around them, already certain that what is theirs is already on its way up the path, already almost home. Here is the whole picture. Your money is never lost. It is only away. So speak to it, as you would call someone home you love. Release the fear that keeps it circling. Forgive every hand that seemed to hold it back. Bless what leaves you, so it returns increased. Give thanks for every small return until you see supply everywhere. Release your grip on the how, and trust the wider way. Hold steady and patient in the gap between the word and the proof. And finally, claim it as already home before your eyes ever confirm it. This is the full teaching, laid out simply, and it is available to you the moment you choose to believe it. If this teaching has stirred something quiet and certain in you today, I want to gently tell you about a space we have built for those who are ready to walk this further. It is called the Overflow Covenant, and it is a small, devoted circle for those who no longer wish to dabble in these truths, but wish to live inside them daily, with deeper teachings, with guided declarations, with a steady community of others learning to speak their word with the same authority Florence Scovel Shinn spoke of. It is not a program of pressure or hustle. It is simply a covenant, a promise you make with your own consciousness, to keep choosing overflow instead of lack, to keep calling your good home instead of chasing it. If you feel drawn to that deeper walk, the door is open for you, and I would be honored to walk it alongside you. Let us speak the word once more together. Every dollar I release comes home to me in peace. Every dollar I release comes home to me increased. My word is my wand. And so, dear one, whatever you have released today, whatever seems far from you right now, speak to it gently, and remember, what is truly yours is always, always finding its way back home,